Welcome to the Azure DevOps user group. My name is Jeffrey Palermo, and we're really excited about the content that we have today. And for those of you who are maybe new to the group or even watching this recording long into the future, this group is for software professionals working on the Microsoft platform who want to explore, implement, and learn DevOps. This group embraces cloud, and as such will bring the best presenters for each topic while streaming all content and operating in a virtual manner. This group recognizes the technical practices included in the DevOps Handbook by Gene Kim, Jez Humble, Patrick Dubois, and John Willis, and we encourage members to read this book. From a technology perspective, we look to implement these practices on Visual Studio based software in the Microsoft platform, leveraging Azure DevOps services and all kinds of Azure services, as well as Windows Anywhere. And so a few logistics for the people who are live with us on the webinar. As you go through, there's a few ways to ask questions and comments. First, there's the chat window. And if you wouldn't mind somebody in the chat window, just verify that our audio is coming through loud and clear. That would be helpful. And then there's also a Q&A window that you can ask questions. And if you'd like to ask your question using your microphone in a more interactive way, just let us know, and you can unmute your microphone and ask the question. Each person should be able to just unmute the microphone and ask the question as that may be necessary. So why don't we get right into our content? We'll post more meetings and presenters on the schedule. Make sure to go to the meetup group, meetup.com/Azure DevOps user group, separated by dashes. And you can see the upcoming schedule and make sure to join in order to get notifications. So our speaker today and our topic is DevOps focused, a customer-centric perspective. And our speaker today, Lars, is an accomplished technology leader who's passionate about bringing user experience and customer experience principles together to allow DevOps teams to focus on their goals and the customers that they serve at the same time. And he's gained some valuable insight from applying these practices in a variety of industries like e-commerce, fintech, and healthcare tech. And his areas of emphasis are strength-based organizational growth and leadership development. So I'm really excited about this presentation, and thank you, Lars, for your time and for presenting to us today. And I will turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jeffrey, and thank you, Rain, for having me today. And I'm really happy about the great turnout that we already have at this hour. And let's dive into the presentation that we're going to talk about today. It's DevOps focused, a customer-centric perspective. And let me pull up the presentation and arrange the video screens here so I can get it started. 1 second. There is the button to get the presentation started. And okay, so we should be right in there. So customer-centric perspective, why do we want to do this, and where is this applicable, and how do I do this with technology? That's really what we're going to talk about today. And okay, I'm still practicing on how to forward this here while I'm in certain contexts. Okay, good. I think I managed to click this forward. So why are we talking about it? So what we are finding nowadays in the 21st century, right, that companies are more and more customer-centric, and the customers are expecting more and more to be appreciated exactly at the micro moments. That's what Harvard points out, right? The micro moments of the 21st century customer, they want to be anticipated and they want to have an awesome experience. Now, how do I do this in the digital age, and how do I do this in the cloud? How do I know that the customer will be delighted after we push some kind of feature into production, after we release, right? How do I know this? Can I even anticipate the customer's delight before we release, right? So that is really what this presentation is about. And how do I do this with DevOps tools and with DevOps principles? And how does the Azure cloud fit into that? That's really what we're going to talk about today. And let's just talk about what these customer journeys are and why is this really important, right? Well, at the end of the day, I think you all realize that the customer is really who pays the bills, who makes the enterprise, any company viable, right? The reason why you have a job is because you got to produce some kind of really meaningful software to some kind of customer who might not, if you look at the customer journey timeline, who might not be aware of it, but you want to generate awareness. Well, you have a marketing department, yes, but if you have great software, that helps marketing to actually say, hey, this software is great. So people are becoming aware of it, right? And there might be an app store, you might have an app with that, and there's feedback and all that, and people see this and they might be saying, all right, well, let me try and just utilize this. And they might, go from, through awareness, consider it, and then they plunge in there and actually try your workflow or the journey, right? They purchase something or they transact, they interact with your software in any form or fashion. And what the idea there is as they're working through that, you want to make sure that they are delighted. Delight is important because then you find customer retention and they talk to others, and that's the advocacy that we're looking for, right? And when that all happens, if you're able to produce software that delights customers in that way, in any of the workflows, on any of the transactions or interactions, that is unlocking growth. That's the flywheel of success. And that's what you want, because it's also a really good thing, for your career, right? Because it drives your career forward. So the vision for DevOps teams in that type of context is really, how do I change my focus? How do I put investments into place? How do I look at the operational landscape, when I do the ops and DevOps, right, to be customer focused? Because there is a direct and powerful relationship between customer experience, abbreviated with CX, right, quality and engineering excellence, and then also ultimately revenue increase, right? And the whole idea of what I want to present is that this experience is actually tangible enough and recognizable through metrics and anything that you're logging, because one core principle of DevOps is observability. So you do have probably a lot of observable data already out there. The question is just, how do I organize that in a way so that I'm not overwhelmed, but I'm actually focused on the customer, and it informs my development process, right? My release process and my operations monitoring process. That's what this is about. So in other words, well, it's a cognitive, data-driven approach that drives growth. The growth is business growth, career growth, job growth. That's what we're talking about. So quite relevant. Let me see, I saw something flashing over in the chat. Are there any questions so far? Nope, not quite. All right, very good. Then let me go to the next section over here. So where is this actually applicable, right? Well, what we found is when you read the news, you find that companies are basically trying to catch up to the rate of the competitors entering the market that really get it, that are in lockstep with their customers, that delight their customers, that really leading the market. That's represented over here in that graph with the red line, right? And in the cloud-based environment where you even have, infrastructure is just code, right? The way to address the customer really quick in an engaging way, is so much well, if you will, easier, but it's also quicker. So within like 2-week sprint cycles, you have to stay on top of the customer interaction, delighting the customer all the time. That's a big feat, right? And there might be companies that are falling behind. That's where I put a mind the gap in there. There are companies that are really finding very strong challenge. So how do you overcome this challenge is really the question that we're going through here. And as I'm building out a CI/CD pipeline, what do I need to focus on? And is there not already so much to focus on that I could get lost? Where do we build that trade-off so that it's becoming second nature, it's built into the fabric of our organization without too much overhead, right? That's really what the idea is here. And it's important because you might be working for a company where the margins are really low. So you don't have additional money sitting around there or additional people that you want to actually inject into this concept, right? But you need to stay in touch with your customers, otherwise they're going somewhere else. Or, let's say you produce code that is kind of average, but in that case, they have a huge and sentiments about so you want to actually, bring this principle forward in your company, if that's the case, because it actually saves them with the customer service cost. It's substantial, and I will have a business case later on that we can look at, and you will appreciate how expensive that is. Or you have a shopping cart, right? You talk about the cash conversion situation, and you're wondering, well, there are only like so few people actually transacting. We have this great store, we have attractive products, and only 10% of people actually convert, by clicking the buy button in the shopping cart. So, that's also where you want to analyze this, and this is very applicable, right? Or, you basically are in a field where the competition is winning and you just have no idea how. So it's very good thing to actually get started by focusing on the customer, because the competition might inherently do this already, and you need to do that as well. So, or there's just a general desire to win. Let's say you have a startup and you just want to win from the beginning, from the get-go. You don't want to fall behind. And that's where this is relevant as well. What it all means is as I said earlier, this needs to permeate the whole fabric of the organization. It's not only a marketing thing. It's not only for the product owner. It's not only for the people in SRE that are looking at what went wrong. It is really for the entire DevOps teams, for the entire engineering teams, that need to participate, right? So let's look at a business case over here. I see the chat is very active. Okay, cool. All right, you guys keep on chatting, and I think Jeffrey is going to chime in if there are any questions. Opportunity illustration. So let's just assume you have a very big customer base, right? Quarter of a billion customers globally and transacting. It's 140 billion per quarter. That is your revenue, right? It's huge, but you have a high uptime and you have a high availability. So I would just want to say that it's a very big quality organization. There are a lot of customers already really happy, and you're wondering why would I bother in this situation? Why do I bother? You might have that position, reliable, but it's beyond reliability and it's beyond availability. And let's look at what this can do for us. So let's say there are 40,000 failed customer interactions per day. That's a lot, but not actually really, because there are more transactions to make 250 million global customers happy per day, right? There are many more transactions. So that's why the availability is high. The functionality is really good. But 40,000 failed customer interactions would be, for instance, there are 500 errors, 400 errors, there might be some application errors bubbling up or some other type of things, friction moments where customers are just perplexed and they do a lot of rapid mouse movements or, frustrated hammering on the keyboard that we can measure. So those are failed customer interactions where a customer just gets put off and is not really in sync with it. You hope that they overcome their hurdle, but they might not. So let's attribute just $1 for failed customer interaction. It might be more, it might be less, but on average, that's what I calculated one time at a very large user base. It's about a dollar that it costs per failed customer interaction. So that would be $14 million, a little bit more than that, in annualized impact. But as I said, this large organization has probably also customer service representatives, and 40,000 FCIs, they actually drive additional call volume. And if you have a 22% average call volume in a day, you're talking about 8,800 calls that are attributed to such FCIs. So why do we want to bother to reduce this? Well, at $5 per call, and that's about the full cost, of maintaining the call centers and having the employees staffed, in a mix of low cost and high cost locations. So it's a mixed cost. At $5 a call, you still add it all up, you still get over to $80 million annualized impact of those. So $80 million might be a rounding error, right? When you have $140 billion per quarter revenue and all that. Well, revenue is not the income, right? And remember the last time when you asked for additional budget on your project and somebody said, well, yeah, you're asking for 50,000 to get your project done, but we don't really have that in the budget, or you're asking for an additional resource. And they say, well, we don't have that. But we don't have that in the budget. Well, how about if we can actually find a way to make the budget bigger, right? And this is the way. So over here, I'll leave this to you to read later. There's a plan of attack and how to move forward in addressing this situation. But I just wanted to go deeper into how would we actually look at this, When you see that the customer experience cycle over on the right, you see the, published customer experience cycle, it's huge. There is, there are people in the business section of our company kind of like really busy working out new products, looking at how users might react and might interview people, and they do a lot of things. There's accounting, there's support, there's sales, there's services, product and development. Well, that's the area here, product and development, right? That's what we're focusing on right now. So we're breaking this out. This nice round DevOps cycle, and Jeffrey likes the round one, so that's why I put that in there instead of this other loop that you sometimes see, right? But you want to inject that type of principles, CX principles, into that loop. That's really what this is. How do we unlock growth? Because hey, what we are normally doing is we're building something, right? This is basically saying we're going from an experience like this, from like not so good to actually great, right? So, or why is this happening to me? Yeah, I was able to transact, to wow, this is amazing. Yeah, I can do this, and yes, I'm really proud that I purchased something or interacted with this workflow, right? So that means that you don't only listen to what your product owner tells you, right? But you also want to know, what is the customer's perspective on that? Let's say you come up with an A/B testing type of idea. How do you validate this? How do you even come up with your A/B test? How are you having a voice? How do you know that your product owner, UX people have a valid hypothesis that you're excited about putting your effort in their coding? That's really what you want to do. And before you release, you want to actually craft some success criteria. So something that you can measure. You change a widget on a web area, you enter an experience, but how do you measure this? How can I build success criteria that after release you can you can monitor this and you know, wow, the customers are actually happier than they were before, right? Any early feedback is really important. And how do you engineer this through the pipeline that you know, all right, this is enough testing that we had to do. You know, we're changing this workflow, we're impacting another workflow. All we have to do is we have to maintain tests around those two workflows. And, you know, yes, later on we run an automated regression test on everything, that's fine, but we're focusing on these two things. If those two things are in good shape, then we know that we can release. So that type of focus of what to cut out and what to leave in, that is very important here. All right, on the next one, now here's really the substance of the whole thing is, and how do I make this happen, right? Let's say you have a pipeline. The middle line over here is representing your CI/CD pipeline. You know, let's say you're using even Octopus Deploy, you know, and you have all of this in place, and you listen to the Azure DevOps presentations quite a bit, and you learn how to put this in, and that's good. And you might even you know, read about Capital One's Hygieia implementation that visualizes the good quality of the product that you just built, right, through a Hygieia visualization. And you feel good about this, you know, your pipeline health is great, and you can push this thing to live. Let's just focus on the lower part of this picture, right? And what typically happens is that you have to hope that the customer is happy, because your engineering piece has high quality, yes, but we don't know if it resonates with the customer. And to do that, you might need to do a little bit more, right? You want to measure the performance criteria, right? Is the responsiveness there? Yeah, you might say, yeah, duh, we do this already, you know, and we might have Dynatrace in place, and that would be great. Or you have New Relic in place. Well, that would be wonderful. But are you additionally having the performance tuned not only to the application, but also to the workflows, the high critical workflows that always have to work just fine? Can you represent that, right? That is important. And have you then also focused on the cohorts of the customers, you know, so that there is a best cohort experience? And it's not only for the customers, XYZ, your main customer, but it includes also items that some engineer call edge cases, or, you know, that's like stuff that we don't want to think about because it is too much to worry about, and we're worrying about it, but we want to actually ignore it. So we call it edge cases, right? Once you have the data really put together in a way that you know about your important cohorts, customer cohort experience, you can model the experience as well. And then through the development, through your pipeline, you can of course, you know, simulate that with test data upfront, even through your unit test, into your system test, regression test. And then later also you monitor this, of course, in production, right? And you can also look at the funnel drops, if you will. You know, you can model funnels in, you know, for the customer journeys across your workflows. So that is easy to be done here with Dynatrace. And I grabbed basically that picture is from Dynatrace itself. New Relic also has a very good product. It's called New Relic Insight. If you use New Relic, it comes with the product already, typically, right? And it is very active on the application basis, right? But if you read really deeply through their very well-formed documentation, you will find ways on how to actually activate the funnel measurements and the cohort measurements, you know, by workflow as well. So it's not directly out of the box, but it can be really easily added, you know, and they will help you. They have a great help desk as well, that will help you with looking at the right type of user tutorials, right? They are there. And if you're especially lucky, my favorite tool really in this whole thing is IBM Tea Leaf. it's wonderful, because what you can see there is you cannot only monitor all these things that I talked about, cohort experience, workflows across this, performance, but you can also see items like customer frustration, mouse movements, centers of aggravation on your website. You can see this page by page. So it's kind of like really like a movie, right? Like a movie. And you cannot watch all of your customers, but you can set traps and you can take samples, right, about the things that you're really interested in, and you go fish, and then you can see, oh, wow, this went really well. Or you fish and you see, oh, there's some edge cases that we haven't considered. And you feed this back to your product owner, and you have a really good fact-based conversation. I've done that multiple times. Product owners told me initially, oh yeah, we're moving from one architecture to the other. Don't worry, in the new architecture, it will be all fine. I said, okay, I'll wait. So a month later, the new architecture was deployed, and I had the same problem that I found with a small case of customers that still had the problem. And what happened was they just transposed one workflow that worked on the old architecture onto the new architecture without changing the workflow in any form or fashion. And of course, it wasn't architecturally an issue. It was some kind of case in the workflow that wasn't thought through, right? That this software here really highlights. And the effort of doing this, trust me, is not so high after you actually set it up. It's actually a really good, fun thing to do. It's very rewarding when you see what type of discussion you can all of a sudden on the product level you can have on the product level when you're a technologist, right? It's real fun. So this, the core of the whole thing, it's basically asking you to not only focus on your pipeline, on the pipeline health, but also look at the customer experience tools that you might already have in place. Ask to bring those monitoring items on board, and calibrate your monitoring not only for the application, but also to the customer experience areas. Talk to your favorite UX researcher, not the UX designer. Maybe your UX designer that will tell you who the UX researcher is, right? You might even have a CX person in your company. Those are good conversation partners. And through that conversation, you will see in how you can calibrate your monitoring tools or customer experience tools if you have T-Leaf in place or something like that. There are many more tools that are equally good, and then bring your game really to the next level, right? So that you always know your customer will be satisfied. You just have no doubt anymore, right? So example actions for implementation. So how do I actually get started? The cool thing is, like with New Relic, for instance, you can get started by just putting an AppDex score together. An AppDex score is easy, right? You basically say what your response time should be, ideal response time of the application on a server base, on the end user response time, and it starts measuring this, and it basically alerts you of all of these FCIs that I talked about before, right? And if anything drops below a certain point, then in this example over here, then 99% of your customers are just happy. That's great. That's good, right? But if it goes below, you can put alerts in there, and you can figure out what's the root cause, right? It might be a 400 error, it might be a 500 error, it might be an error from your system that bubbled up that is impeding the customer. And it might be something that just, caused the whole system to be unstable. And you can model that actually easy. And that's on the application basis. Now, if you want to do this, drill this down on the workflow basis, you need to build a hypothesis, like, okay, hypothetically, this is our main workflow. Let's see how many customers are interacting with that and how the happiness is. And all of a sudden you discover additional workflows, additional use cases that you want to monitor. And it brings that discussion with product really into play. When you have your product owner, it's not only a one-way, it might be a two-way discussion, right? So start with something like New Relic, Dynatrace, IBM, T-Leaf, other products, start with that first. And then really focus on your CI pipeline setup and the gateways and the measurements in between, so that they are, in synchronization with your customer experience. The testing is in synchronization with that. You test only those things that are important for those workflows. And you focus on the coverage, unit test coverage, integration coverage, any type of coverage that's really focused on those items. You don't have to focus on the other items because they're not relevant on what you're doing during those 2 weeks of your sprint, right? And you look at release readiness, and you look at release monitoring, success criteria of a release in a new way, in a successful way. And the habit of really praying that the release goes well is you can still do that, of course, but you have a little bit more of a certainty there. The risk of a release failing actually diminishes, right? And that is really important. So you can still cross your fingers and hope, but you also know that you've done your best, to model that workflow. Your customer is most likely going to be happy, and if they're not, you have a monitor in place, and you really know when to pull back, or which A/B test you actually need to go for, right? So that's really what it's about, and where is this discipline actually aligned? So the discipline that I'm talking about is really at the center of developer, quality, SRE, and product and customer, right? That's where the center of the gravity of this craft is. So it allows you to really bring all of these aspects together and bring that into the fabric of your CI pipeline, into your pod, into your development team, and make your customer consistently happy. Again, why do you want to do it? It drives your growth. It drives the growth of your company, right? So now what do you want to do? What should you do? It's basically the call to action that you're applying these things that you've learned today by either talking to other people and say, hey, what have we learned? Let's just investigate into these products that we could add, and do like a demo and do some experimentation, or ask for help, right? Ask who in the company is already talking about UX research. Can we do like a pilot where we can, bring these two things together, And if you need help, I included my contact information. I'm there for inspiration. But the next step to action is for you to do something, all right? So that basically concludes the presentation today. I'm very happy that you listened for the last 35 minutes, and I'm wondering, are there any questions?
So any of the attendees, if you unmute your microphone, you can ask a question, or you can put a question in the Q&A box, or you can put it in the chat window if you have any questions. But man, Lars, this is great information, a lot of food for thought, and actually a pretty big challenge. I think all of us can introspect and find ways where even these simple principles, we're not applying them consistently.
Thank you.
So Kevin LeBranch has his hand raised, but I think, Kevin, you can.
I sure have a mic. Yes, sir.
Yeah, go for it.
I just didn't want to interrupt. Thank you for that presentation, Lars. I work for a university. We have hundreds of applications we support that I have been working with a couple of team members to get us into a lot of this move. What we're finding that is very difficult is getting people to understand value proposition. Have you seen this in an organization like a university or somewhere where we're not really traditionally selling the code we write as a product, if you will, but yet it is very much what I've been convinced is we've got to convince them that we have to write the next piece of code that actually helps the bottom line versus that. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how I should answer your question.
Sure.
Are you building internal software? Are you building
Yes.
the software for the purpose of others? Or are you doing this for enlightening students that are hopefully learning these principles when they go to other companies?
Sure.
Which
A little bit of everything. We write software to help improve business processes throughout the university. We write software that the students directly use. For example, potentially even to apply to the university. That actually is our own software.
Yeah.
So we have such a huge offering that I'm finding it difficult to convince people that we have to focus. In other words, between choice A and choice B, which one will actually make you the $1 million, not the $10, if I could say it that way. Have you experienced this issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, so much so that with one company that comes to mind, you know, they basically, well, there are several business scenarios in my mind right now. I'm trying to figure out the best one, but I think the best one that I would say is like there were people who basically said, look, we are not aware of all of our workflows. We just don't know. We were told to put a feature together, we put it into production, we have good faith that the customer actually likes it. Well, have we ever measured it? So in your example, for instance, let's say the customer applying for your university, right? To join, and that's important because, you know, they're paying to be educated. So there's the money proposition. So how many of them are actually delighted by the application process and would recommend others to go through the same process, right? That's the money value there. But you're not measuring at the moment, and you need to just start at one of those things. And I would just start right there, where people enter the gates, right? They come in. Let's just measure it there and find out how many people are delighted. And if they're delighted, then you know you have data that you can give to your marketing department, and they can say, look, we have the most delighted people that apply for this university, and you know, we have a success student rate of such a thing. But the front end, you know, where people come into the experience of the university and the graduation, you know, are kind of like in lockstep of you know, advertisers for your experience, right? So it might be a good way to start there, and start with a core team and start measuring, and don't pay people too much on what this is really about, right? But once you found something, then you know you've struck gold, because the data that people are sitting on, that you're sitting on, is gold. You might have not found immediately your gold mine, you know, but there might be another application that creates actually bigger business value. So I would have to spend a little bit more time with you to identify where to start for sure. But my first inclination is, wherever people are applying, let's just measure that is an unbiased experience, right? That's talking about the cohorts. Is an unbiased experience and a successful experience for all applicants that are supposed to have a successful experience, right? Not those bots that are out there and trying to hack into your application process, right? They shouldn't have a good experience, right? You know, I'm going with that. All right. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and that's
yeah.
Some areas that we're trying in our little team to do that, try to find that success story to illustrate the point. I think our organization is trying to do too much.
Exactly, and that's why I'm talking about focus. That's why I put this thing out there in this weird characters. So it's all about the focus, because there's so much to do. There's so much data, and everybody says, look, we need to go here, we need to go there. Once you focus, then it is the value proposition, but only when you focus. And that's the competitive advantage. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Is there any other questions from anyone in the group? If you unmute your microphone, you can ask the questions. And some of you have asked if there's going to be a recording. Yes, there will be. You'll receive it over email. And if you don't get that, just follow back up. It'll also be posted to the Meetup group. And also a link to the presentation will be put in the comments on meetup.com as well. So we have another question. Matt Miller, go ahead and unmute your microphone, sir.
Sure. Hi, Lars.
Matt.
So I found your slide interesting about the, what was it, the forming the hypothesis on a problem. That is actually, if you're looking for allies in your organization for putting this type of system into place, that is very similar to cybersecurity threat hunting. That same form of hypothesis, use your tools to research, figure out the patterns, and then basically decide, what you're going to do about it. That is threat hunting to a T, except in here, of course, it's, customer experience. So if anyone's looking for allies on how to implement that in their organization, look in your cybersecurity organization. You may find some.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, Matt, and it's good that you mentioned that, is as I was searching for things that delight or do not delight the customer, when I go over those FCIs, I see a lot of things where rogue attackers, may it be people doing it or bots doing it, you actually see profiles of that, which you can easily then really refer, as you said, to your cybersecurity unit, and then shift your focus again on the other customers if you're on that track. But yes, that same principle works, and the tools that you can deploy easily also deployed, for the cybersecurity space. Yes, very good suggestion. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Do we have any other questions? Doesn't seem anyone is moving to do that. So we'll make sure to post the information, the slides, and the link to the recording on the meetup group. And Lars, I really appreciate your time and the very thought-provoking presentation. I think that the members who viewed live today, as well as the ones who will view the recording, I think it'll spark a lot of discussion in the various organizations.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for listening.
And before we go, what's the best way for our folks to get in touch with you?
Oh, send me a message through email or link to me on LinkedIn.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Lars, and everyone. Have a great day, and keep tabs on the meetup site for the next meeting of the Azure DevOps User Group. Take care.
Awesome. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.